Eric Miscoll, and welcome to this edition of the Eric Miscoll Show. As always, I'm joined by Phil Stoughton from Down Under. And today we're tackling the issue that has kind of confounded the industry seemingly for at least a year, and that being the material supply chain challenges being experienced across the industry, across the globe. Joining us today, two guests. First time on the show today, joining us is Lynn Torrel with Flex. Lynn is the Chief Procurement and Supply Chain Officers with Flex. And Don Akery, backed by popular demand, is the President of TTIi Americas. So Lynn, Don, thank you both for taking the time to join us today and your willingness to share your insights and opinions on what's happening in this area. As always, I'd like to give you each a chance to introduce yourselves. And Lynn, I'll begin with you if you want to say a few words about who you are and who Flex is.
Great. Well, thank you, Eric. It's a pleasure to be with you today. So as you said, I am Chief Procurement and Supply Chain Officer at Flex. Flex is a global electronic manufacturing services provider and logistics provider. Basically, we build product for other companies. We also help with their design. But we have a massive global presence where we do manufacturing. I'm responsible for our direct and indirect procurement, freight and logistics, inventory management, our strategic supply chain programs that we have in place to support our customers, as well as our innovation in supply chain. So Flex, $25 billion company. We have about 1,000 customers that we support, about 160,000 employees across 30 countries. And when we're looking at our supply base, it's about 16,000 suppliers that we work with. And that translates into 1 million SKUs in our supply chain. So a rather sophisticated, large, and complex supply chain. I joined Flex in October of 2019. And prior to that, I had been with Avnet for 25 years. An electronics distributor. So I've spent my career in high tech and great company that I get to represent here today. Mm-hmm.
And with that many responsibilities, safe to assume you haven't slept in many months then.
Right? Yes. I guess nobody expects to be 4 months into a job and have a global pandemic followed by, multiple supply chain crises that we faced since then. I like to think that I learned fast, in the new role, and we've been really as agile as we can in just continuing to adapt to the situation that we're facing each day.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Don, allow you, sir.
Yep, I'm president of TTI's business in the Americas. I also sit on the corporate staff for strategy across the family of companies. TTI is, there is a brand that we go to market with that's about a $3.5 billion entity across the globe. We also own Mouser Electronics, which has grown from 50 million to this year over 3 billion. And then we own Sager Electronics, and then a collection of semiconductor companies that we've been specialty semiconductor companies that we've pulled together over the past few years. With this specialty model, we don't distribute everything. We limit the line card, able to inventory at a deeper level and go to market, I'll say slightly different than some of the broadline distributors. We've chosen to go with a family of companies or a family of specialists. I've been with the company for about 10 years, but been in the industry, all in electronic component distribution since 1984.
Okay. And you had said before that TTI just announced an acquisition yesterday. You want to mention?
Yeah, correct. It's just now being made public. We bought another distributor, about a $50 million distributor based out of Irvine, California, SMD. Again, a specialty model, somebody that we've been watching for quite a while. We're not really known to be that acquisitive, but the truth is, if you were to go back and look at the history, we've acquired about 30 companies ourselves. Again, not to grow the top line, but more to enhance the technology or the specialization from the companies that we're already in.
Okay, thank you. Listen, let me kick this off. I've heard it said here recently that the component crisis is not discriminating across the board. It's pretty much hitting all areas, right? You both have an interesting perspective on this. So I'd like to ask you, and maybe Lynn, start with you, kind of, how are the shortages impacting all the different areas? What are you seeing?
Yeah, we are definitely seeing a significant impact from supply chain shortages that we're experiencing. We go to market across multiple segments, so we have a very broad view. So in our agility business model, we have our consumer electronic and cloud space, consumer devices, lifestyle products. We also are in automotive, health solutions, and industrial. So a broad range of customers that we are supporting. And just about every customer is being impacted by those shortages. It's a day-to-day challenge to resolve the shortage, to continue to manufacture, and we work on that, but they continue to be impacted. And probably we saw, the first major wave of this beginning in January, where we saw some allocation from some suppliers and some decommits taking place where orders were pushed out. And since January, it's been kind of one shock to the system since we've gone through there. If you think about the severe weather in Texas and the implications that had, earthquake in Japan, the fire at the Renaissance factory, the Suez Canal, COVID outbreaks in Southeast Asia, freight and logistics challenges. So it's just kind of been this ongoing impact to the supply chain that's resulted in these shortages that have continued. I think despite that, everybody working very collaboratively, both with our customers to, looking at their demand and their critical needs, working closely with our suppliers to help, really highlight the required components to keep lines running and to keep our customers satisfied. We've been able to manage, I would say, quite successfully through all those challenges. But it is tiring, to your point that I don't sleep much.
Yeah, it's a crazy situation, Lynn, and I've spoken to, and you talk about not discriminating, I've spoken to EMS companies of, the size of Flex down to much, much smaller ones. And one of the things that I hear kind of when we're just chatting is it's putting a new tension on customer relationships. Certainly at the smaller end, I'm hearing people saying customers are just calling up and saying, get us our stuff. We don't care how you do it. That's kind of your problem, which doesn't really make sense because it's a global shortage. Are you seeing an additional tension there? You have really deep relationships with your customers. So does that help?
Well, I think the relationships, it's always a bit of a relationship build business. You build up those relationships after working with people for many years. There's certainly tension. Everybody wakes up, whether it be the customer, Flex, or suppliers, everybody wakes up wanting to support your customers. And nobody likes to have the difficult conversations. And there is tension, especially when it's, looking at the potential financial impact that this will have on a business. So while there's tension, I hope and always try to lead in a very collaborative manner to understand this is global in nature, and we are doing everything that we can to support and trying to pull people together for that common good. Because I also worry a little bit about, not a little bit, I worry quite a bit about attrition of employees. This is, it's a very challenging time when every day is a difficult discussion. So we continue to try and motivate our employees, motivate our suppliers to help us help our customers. And the other interesting phenomenon is there's a lot of customers who now have electronic content in their products that did not have electronic content before. So when you think about that explosion of content that we're talking about. So while this isn't my first semiconductor cycle that I've worked through, or a lot of my colleagues and customers, it is for some of our customers. This is the first cycle that they've kind of experienced. So we want to work really closely with them to share our knowledge and our best practices for how to manage through the situation.
Yeah, and just keeping them informed, I guess.
Don, what are you seeing in the market? How are you viewing this?
Yeah, if you look at it, I mean, obviously all the things Lynn brought up, I'll say the challenges that, when she listed them that way, it made me tired thinking, okay, we had to live through all of those things. I'd forgotten about some already. But you got to remember, the supply chain shortage that we're in now is sheer demand. So I look at it a little differently that, we sell across all the segments. We sell to, the family of companies, hundreds of thousands of customers across the world. And I watch the demand from each of those segments. I can tell you all of those segments are up with the exception of commercial air. Commercial air took the hit with Boeing. While I say it's not up, it's flat actually now. So it's come back to that level. But, segments, the EMS segment that everybody, listening in on this podcast here, is, that piece of it is up, 20-25% for us. But that's not the fastest growing segment of the business. Automotive transportation is up closer to 50%, even as it's trended down. Industrial, which is, you don't think of it, it's typically a low single digit growth. It'll be greater than 25% growth this year. And then, just down the list, even medical with what happened, I'll say in 2020 with ventilators and medical devices, that's up year over year, even on top of, I'll say, the windfall orders that came in. So that sheer demand is really what started it. And then you add the pandemic on top of it, where suppliers had to shut down factories. I'll say, the word resilience was used earlier. That's what I would describe the entire electronic component supply chain. Combination of our suppliers, distributors, the EMS companies. They've done an unbelievable job through this cycle, different than in past cycles. If you look at it, that collaboration, I've been through quite a few of these cycles also, and some of them have been very, I'm going to say brutal. They became very adversarial. Relationships were severed. It's not that way. Yes, I'm involved in a lot of expedites, trying to find products, but it's a more collaborative process. Nobody's pounding on a table. I think part of it is the media attention in the broader world has made more people understanding that it's not just them. It's everybody. It's everybody who's been through a cycle or not been through a cycle.
Yeah, because it's not just the supply chain for electronics that's having problems. It's it's everything. We're hearing about construction companies that can't get timber and all kinds of other things. And if you want to do your Christmas shopping, you should have probably done it 2 or 3 months ago for this year, because everything's difficult. What I'm curious about is we've got a component issue and we've got a logistics issue at the same time. Lynn, you talked about the logistics and transport side. How big an impact is the difficulty in logistics? The 50 or so ships queued up outside of Los Angeles port. How much is that compounding problems?
Well, it certainly is causing additional challenges. I know every dollar value of every product that I have that's on each one of those ships. But one of the things, it didn't happen overnight either. We saw the lead times moving out and the transit times increasing. So we built that into our models. So as we're purchasing and bringing product in, we're taking that into consideration. And in some cases, it's not able to do 100% because there are some times when it's longer than what we would expect. But it's certainly adding pressure to cash when you're talking about funding inventory a much longer time when it's in transit versus being able to transform it.
Yeah, I think that whole cash impact, work in progress, amount of product in shipment is a huge issue for a lot of companies, particularly some of the smaller EMS companies. I've spoken to companies who have, pretty much doubled their work in progress inventory and, cash employed, which is phenomenal in terms of impact.
Yeah, we actually discovered I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, I was highlighted, we were late making some payments. And when we checked into it, it was blocked invoices because we hadn't received the product yet, because it had been delayed in transit. So those unknown events that come up during a time like this, you just have to, it raises up, it's an issue, you've got to figure out how to address it immediately, and then how to prevent it from happening in the future.
Yeah, I think what was really good about what Don said is the feeling that people are being more collaborative this time, that it's not such a adversarial relationship. Is that because, I think one of the things the pandemic taught us was that we need to collaborate, we need to work together to get through these solutions. So we were already predisposed to be perhaps a little bit more open and a little bit more honest and collaborative with our partners. Is that what you're seeing as well, Lynn? There's a desire just to roll up sleeves and work on it together rather than fight each other over it?
I think that probably is a good point. And actually, when you reflect upon 2020, all of the challenges we were going through at the time, it was more about a lack of visibility than a lack of supply. But what we went through, every factory in the world, every factory that Flex had, it shut down, it reopened. We started making sure we had PPE for our employees. We changed all of our manufacturing facilities to enable social distancing. That includes transportation, that includes going to the cafeteria. Every aspect of our operations were changed in every one of our facilities around the world. And that did have an impact for a period of time on output. Well, our suppliers were all doing the same thing. And I know in early days when we were trying to understand the scope of the impact, we contacted all of our suppliers and asked, to reconfirm purchase orders. And some of the initial answers we got were, I'd love to tell you, but I can't get back into my factory yet, or I can't get into the office to be able to understand where it was. We had a bit of a benefit because it was after Chinese New Year, so there was a bit of inventory built up that kind of kept the lines running until such time as we were able to, come back in to the facilities, get the information from our suppliers. But during that time, it was rapidly changing as COVID spread. It impacted all of our suppliers. We developed a sort of a playbook of how to address it when it was going into each country, and how we could, number one, protect our employees, but then work really collaboratively with our customers and our suppliers. And, going through all of 2020 and being able to achieve what was achieved, facing the shortages that we experienced beginning of 2021, and here we are, months later, almost a year that we've been dealing with this, we've shown a tremendous amount of resiliency in managing these supply chains. And I do think it is partially, like you mentioned, the collaboration of people just having gone through a lot and understanding that, it's very technical how we get through this, and we have to be very detailed in the information flow rather than, pounding on a table, like Don said, that it's really not taking place. People are understanding. And it's actually kind of funny, for probably the first time in my career, my family understands what I actually do for a living,
Yeah, because the term supply chain is on mainstream media for a change.
Exactly. In fact, there was some severe weather a few weeks ago. My mom called and she's like, is everything okay? And it happened to be in New York, and my sister lives in New York. And I said, well, Mom, it's Leslie, and she goes, no, I mean about your job. Is everything okay with the weather? And I'm like, okay, now they get it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Hey, Don, so from a systems perspective, with everybody that, we're talking about the supply chain and the technology behind it and people being out. So how have the systems held up? How have for TTI in dealing with all of this?
Well, and if you look at our business, if you look at the TTI model itself, you got to remember it was built on the lowest cost components on the board. Paul Andrews, when he started the company, we started distributing resistors, the least expensive component on the board. Then he went to capacitors, the second least expensive cost. Right now in the Americas, we'll do 1.75 billion. Our average resale, less than 8 cents. Think about that. We ship billions of pieces. So our computer systems were built for large volume transactions. So, no issues whatsoever. We've invested, TTI runs on one system, Mauser runs on a separate system, but a very similar system, but their model's a little bit differently. So, from, I'll say, the core processors and transaction engine, no issues whatsoever. I will tell you where we've seen, and you guys, we've talked about it before, I'll say digital transformation between us, our suppliers, and our customers. We saw that accelerate. I'll say the APIs have been a big push for us because we see the benefit, that transparency, getting the information to the customers as quickly as possible. Our customer engagements are up tenfold from how we started the year. So think about that. It's a huge increase to where customers, we were trying to educate them on APIs. Look, hook up into us. They immediately think about getting a price, but now the supply chain issues, I've got lead times, I've got inventory, I've got those things when they change, they have instant access. So again, system-wise, I've seen huge advancements in the tools that, all customers, suppliers have invested quite a bit more. So I see that as a huge positive that's come out of this. It'll continue to go further up the supply chain. Right now, I'll say the supply chain and electronic components, everybody is now wanting to go back to the material all the way back up. And we'll see that develop nicely over the next few years as we're able to pass that through from our suppliers' factories all the way to the flex or to the OEM who's doing the manufacturing. And that's where everybody wants us to go.
Data is a huge part of it, Lynn.
That's it.
You have, so we're a long way from spreadsheets. You have big systems in place. That must be, is there like a control tower? Is there something that you're looking at every day that allows you to drill down into every component that's late, short?
I've got a screen over here that I can look at from a TTI perspective that I can get to a part number level, how many we have, how many are coming in, how many are committed. And I'm sure at Flex, that information is probably to the nth degree.
It really is to the nth degree. And we have our system that we developed internally. It's called Pulse. We started development in 2015. So it's been a continuous investment and innovation since then. When I was a supplier to Flex before I joined the company, and I used to come to our Pulse centers. So we have these collaboration centers where we show our dashboards on a wall that, like a curved wall in this building where everybody can work together and they're touch screen. It kind of it's like a movie. And I used to come to Flex and I would have data envy because it was just so rich. And now I come to the other side and I recognize just how valuable the information is. And we are able to get down, when you think about the 1,000 customers, 16,000 suppliers, 1 million SKUs that we're managing, I can see that at a global level. I can drill down with a touch to a local site, to where I may have a shortage, to what the last communication was with the supplier on that shortage, all available to us real time. So it's been tremendously beneficial. Even when I think about managing through COVID or the shortages, we've created specific dashboards that help us manage our business. And it's available to we have about 10,000 global procurement and supply chain specialists within the organization. So it's that single source of truth, the way in which we manage our business. And it's not just the supply chain either. We use it to manage all aspects of our business. So it's really, ingrained in part of our culture. And when I hear companies now talking about wanting to invest or, look at digitalization of their supply chain, I feel very lucky that we have done this and we've already done it, but it does make a tremendous difference because it enables the decision making by giving you the source of data that you need to make that decision.
Yeah, yeah, and especially with that huge number of SKUs, there's no way you're gonna be able to figure out where the big issues are, where the priorities are, how you can deal with those without having the raw data, but also the analytics and the support on that. Are you using any AI on top of that to
Oh yes.
assist?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Okay.
do a lot, to help us with our pricing models, with our negotiations, but also with the supply chain. And there's a lot of work understanding, how we can use the data
Yeah.
within Flex, because Flex is very data rich. So we've targeted and addressed some of the obvious areas, pricing methodologies, how we can help our teams negotiate, but looking more at advances of how we can, better utilize that to be more predictive in the future.
Yeah, yeah, that's huge. I think it is a huge data play, and anybody that's thinking now is the time to get data installed and get data ready, you are very, very late to the party. And already suffering the problems.
Hey, I wanted to come back on the logistics issue if I could real quick. And Don, you referenced it there briefly, but I wanted to come back within your business. I'm assuming most of your components that you're sourcing are coming from Asia. Correct me here where I'm wrong.
No, not really. If you look at it, I mean, obviously there's a large volume that are coming, but you got to remember the components that we distribute. There's still a lot with, I'm going to say, America's based. Not so much coming out of Europe anymore, although there is still some out of Europe. And Asia-based, it's not all China. So a lot of it's coming out of, Malaysia, Taiwan, Philippines, Vietnam. So we've, definitely the suppliers have diversified quite a bit. Some of it, I'll say, post Section 301 China tariffs, they moved some of the stuff around. But in our business, it had never moved all the way over to China the way the semiconductor, I'll say, industry had moved. So, that's, again, I view it as a big positive with the supply chain issues with the come up.
Yeah, and my follow-up on that was going to be the mode of transportation. I'm assuming a lot of that is airborne freight. Is that correct?
It was. I mean, part of it is, if you go look at it now, I mean, I was in a meeting with a UPS executive just a few weeks ago, and obviously I had more questions for her than she had for me. But they only fly 19% of their freight. She actually, this is the first I've heard this, that she predicted it would be 2024 before air freight is back to, I'll say, some form of balance. And that's because the wide body jets being flown back and forth. There's, we're still not traveling internationally anywhere near what we did. So, the air freight piece of it, obviously we ship quite a bit, sea containers, but the sea container shortage, the chassis shortage, the truck driver shortage, the rail shortage, all of those things, I've got a transportation team that knows how to get product in any and every port in the Americas, and it doesn't matter, and they switch on a dime if they have to in order to get it. I would like to remind all the customers, I cannot fly helicopters out to those sea containers and get a sea container off one of those ships. I've been asked to do that more than once, and it's just not possible. But I look at it that I think the suppliers and the capacity issues I feel much better about today than I did 6 months ago. But the transportation, I don't feel good. I don't feel good at all. I don't think that I don't see an end in sight where it's going to get back to where it's going to be as free and easy to move the product. It will never go back to the former cost rates. A lot of the sea shipments, those companies were not making money, so they didn't invest. So, there's no investment in the technology. The tracking is very archaic. And they weren't making any money on the shipments anyway. And obviously, we're all paying considerably more. We don't talk in percentages. We talk in multiples freight cost increases. My incoming freight year to date is quadrupled from what it was last year, and it was high last year. So those are the type numbers.
It's huge. what I was curious about, and you've kind of answered that question, Don, in terms of the logistics. We're not over the hump. We're not, what's ahead is as bad as what's behind and possibly worse. With respect to components, are we in that situation? Have we got past the worst? Do we not know? Are we just kind of managing on a day-to-day basis? Lynn, do you think the worst is ahead or behind us?
I think we have a ways to go yet. I talk on a very regular basis with the suppliers that are, constrained at this point. A lot of the investments that were made for additional capacity were made, earlier this year, but the true output or meaningful output will probably come in the, May, June timeframe. But that's only for some of the commodities. Some of the other commodities, it's going to stretch, well through next year into 2023. And that kind of estimation that we have right now is kind of where we sit today, because it's been a bit of a moving target because of the shocks that I talked about earlier that had impact. So if it kind of remains steady state, I think we'll see relief some relief in the second half of next year. If something changes, either a supply chain impact or maybe we see a reducing in demand, then that could change that timing of when we start to see recovery. But I'm kind of gearing up for another year.
Another year of pretty much the same. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. And I think it's interesting what you say about a slowdown in demand. And a couple of companies have told me that they suspect there's a lot of over ordering in the market. So when there is that slowdown in demand, there might be quite a substantial correction there. Don, do you agree with Lynn in terms of timing? Plenty of disruption ahead?
Yeah, I agree. Next year, this is definitely going to go well into next year. I've been asked that question, every month for the past year and a half, and I'm still sticking pretty good that the first half is going to continue. I'll say the booking rates, we're seeing the number of orders stabilize. The actual, I'll say, dollar amount tied to the bookings continues to go up, but a lot of that are price increases. Mm-hmm. So the bookings numbers continue to accelerate for us, but we watch the number of orders, the number of parts, and we've seen that. When I say level off, it's leveled off at record levels. So the orders are still coming in. I do believe we're seeing some commodities, some technologies get better to where obviously Lynn is right in the middle of the complex semiconductors and the automotive industry shortage in semiconductors. So we don't really distribute the complex semiconductors. We've got the MOSFETs, the discretes, a little bit of logic. We're seeing constraints there, but our model is built that we inventory much deeper and broader. We're part of Berkshire Hathaway, but we're operated like a privately held company. So we're not under the scrutiny of Wall Street of turning inventory. So that model is all put in place 50 years ago, and Warren, after he bought the company, said don't change it. So they're not trying to squeeze capital out of it. But we've seen actually our inventory continued to be high up through October of last year. So we were able to keep the inventory levels up. And again, that's part of the systems and algorithms that are built in our systems that we're able to anticipate some of the needs. Now, we did not anticipate the demand going as high or lasting as long in this cycle as what has happened. I don't think anybody could have predicted that. If I had, they would have probably terminated me, called me crazy. But then inventory, I'm going to say, trickled down and dropped from a peak in October to May to where it dropped about 7% is all. And that's our on-hand inventory. Our on order went up dramatically, lead times going out. Our inventory since the middle of May has increased each week. And I can tell you that the inventory here in the Americas, I'm going to speak specifically about it, it's up 25% from that May low point. So that's a sign the capacity, the suppliers, the resiliency of our suppliers, they've come through and been able to deliver quite a bit more to us, but I still have pockets. Some of the, CRCW resistors that are right now going through a cycle and they're very inexpensive parts, but there's not enough of the large case sizes to go around. So I've got, customers that, nobody's calling it allocation, but definitely there's severe constraints. And I place an order and they say, I need 10 million, and they say, I can give you 4 million. So to me, that's allocation. But so I am seeing pockets to where it's getting better. This cycle's been a little different. Customers, and Lynn can comment here, the EMS companies are holding more inventory than they traditionally would in this cycle. The distributors typically, I'll say, served that purpose. I'm not going to say solely, but a huge portion of it. Now we're all trying to increase our inventories, but the customers and the EMS companies in particular have been able to take a different stance. And part of it is their customers are telling them, well, get the products that you can get now. When the, I'll say, constrained products show up, I want to make sure that I can ship. So that we're watching that closely. I'm not concerned about Flex or the large companies. I am concerned about the small to medium size. What does it do to their cash flow? Can they weather holding on to that inventory for a long time? And, obviously we're here to help with that. We can help with our size to help fund some of that ourselves. But, I'm really concerned what happens if their customers cancel. We're not seeing customers cancel. We're seeing customers reschedule and push out, mainly in the automotive part of the business. We haven't seen it widespread in any other parts of our business.
Interesting. Lynn, how do you add to that?
Yeah, I would say, Don, it sounds like you're talking to some of the customers that I have, but it's because we do have higher levels of inventory than we would typically have, but primarily it's because of clear to build issues. You bring in an entire bill of materials and you're missing a device, so you can't build the product. And there has been a period of time where we're receiving some last minute decommits from suppliers. So we'd have all that material in and then find out some of we call it the golden screw, or the one piece that's preventing it. And then of course what our customers are saying is, bring all that in. I'll personally work with you on this shortage with the supplier, so as soon as we're able to resolve that, you can build and I can get that revenue. So it's a challenging game, and that's where I think these really close discussions have to take place. Because typically EMS, it's a low margin business, or not typically, it's a low margin business, and inventory velocity plays a big role in how we manage our financials. So we need to work very closely with our customers and suppliers, because there's a lot of timing that has to take place there to make sure we're able to turn that into revenue. So very challenging times during this time, and certainly continuing to watch closely our global inventory levels.
Yeah, inventory is huge, isn't it? And we've had this huge swing from just in time to just in case. And I'm curious if that pendulum's swung too far, and how quickly, or whether it will swing back, or whether our attitudes to inventory have fundamentally changed. What do you think, Lynn? Do you think inventory is no longer the enemy?
Well, I don't think it's the enemy, but I do think that, over the past few decades, our supply chains have been built on to be, low cost and efficient. And they worked brilliantly for many years in that model until they did not. And that's what we're dealing with today, is the significant ramifications, not just in our industry, but in every industry. So I think a lot of customers are rethinking their global the design of their supply chain. And really, everybody wants to talk about a resilient supply chain, and which is great. You want to be agile and resilient, but there's a cost associated with a truly resilient supply chain. And that's where sometimes it gets a little stuck, because we want customers that want the lowest cost solution in the highest cost region, or areas where the skill set just isn't there. So I think as customers are really thinking about the supply chain of the future, they need to take a lot of considerations involved in that design. In some cases, a single global manufacturing strategy may make sense because of the product they are developing and ship it all over the world. In other cases, more regionalized strategies will make more sense so they can build closer to their end market, reduce freight and logistics challenges and costs associated with that. But a lot of things need to be considered. And I highly recommend, part of it is just taking that first step, doing the analysis, understanding the corporate goals and directions that are being given, and then determining how to design a supply chain that meets those requirements.
Yeah, Lynn, you've just answered my next 5 questions, which is a bit inconvenient, but I think we could do a whole show or series on the supply chain of the future, because I think people are thinking long and hard about it, and the regionalization issue constantly comes up. The role of inventory comes up. I think there's a requirement in supply chain and in product to design for disruption, so you can prepare yourself for shortages in different ways. So I think there are a whole bunch of issues there. I keep coming back to one word when I'm thinking about supply chain, time and time again, and that word is shorter. Should we be fundamentally thinking about shorter supply chains? Because maybe that takes out some of the risk, it takes out some of the logistics problems. It feels better in terms of sustainability. Is that a word that comes up when you guys are discussing supply chain, or am I just being way too simplistic?
Well, I would say from a Flex perspective, we have long been down the path of regionalizing our supply chain whenever we can. We have manufacturing sites all over the world, and certainly when you look at the heavier products that we may source or procure, when you look at mechanical products, plastics, packaging, we've always looked to develop suppliers close to our manufacturing locations. So we have a lot of experience with that. In some cases, it's easily done. In other cases, you struggle a bit more to find the required suppliers and skill sets that you need. When you talk about the semiconductor products, for instance, there've been a lot of, it's very expensive to build a fab, and it's very cheap to ship those products around the world. So that isn't something that we've been able to localize. So I think there's always going to be a complexity in a global supply chain. Kind of always think like localize what you can, is always a good idea, but it's not always the achievable. And secondly, you mentioned the designing for supply chain resiliency. When your customer is looking at a bill of materials, very often you have a sole source part, from a manufacturer in somewhere in the world where there could be impacts for a variety of reasons. And in cases where you're not able to mitigate that because the technology is so unique, then inventory can be a strategy. In other cases, de-risk that design of the BOM by looking at alternative products that you can bring in that are sourced from different parts of the world. So I think long-term, the 5 to 10 year strategy has to be looking at how do we de-risk our supply chains and still be as effective and efficient as we can.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah. I was going to say, you're in the inventory business. So.
That is our business and everything. And I think part of the just-in-time model that was put in place, it was used too broadly. It was a broad brush approach. And I think you have to look at the different products. We go in, and as I described earlier, we sell a lot of the less expensive products that, we had customers, buying and taking delivery 97 times during a year. And these are less than 2 cent parts. So I think, going in and look at the frequency as well as the models. Do you need to be just in time on a 2 cent resistor? Or do you go in and should you be ordering once a quarter or once a year? So I think, the supply chain and putting the thought and I'll say the thorough thinking into what needs to be in what type of program. I think that's part of the complexity that Lynn was talking about. But I think you need to sort of think through that and to make sure that you're not treating all things equal.
Yeah. Let me, I'm going to wrap here in a moment, but I just realized we did get a question from the audience, so to speak. So I was going to pose it because it's an interesting. They say that in addition to the component shortages, the industry is experiencing serious people shortages as well. And do you consider people as part of your supply chains? And, you know, so how does that factor into it? Lynn, you're nodding already.
Nodding already, yes, because people are critical to managing our supply chains. Even when I think about, you know, you have ERP systems that manage production flows and everything, but it's supply chain professionals who make intelligent decisions with the data available to them that keeps everything running. So I absolutely think the core value that Flex brings, one of the core values, is our supply chain competency and leadership, and that is because of the supply chain people we have. And I do worry about our employees, especially like fatigue, or, you know, being isolated, working from home, having the challenging discussions about shortages, because you could be very strategic until there's a shortage. Then it's about resolving the shortage. So we're trying to keep motivating our employees, keep ensure they understand how valuable they are, encouraging them, take time off. The shortage is going to be here tomorrow. You know, not everything's not going to get resolved each day. So I consider our people assets one of the most valuable things we have at Flex. And it's something we invest in them, you know, training and opportunities. And from my point, one of the things I think every company can do is take the time to thank a supply chain professional today. You know, recognize the efforts and the stress that's associated with these roles today, because we need our supply chain teams working for the long haul.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely huge. And Eric, with your psychology background, I think a business that is supply chain manager therapy would be something that's really, really interesting, because they are under so much stress, and you know they do need a big thank you, because they're the people that are getting products to the end user.
Yeah. Don, what would you say about the human side of it?
Well, if you've seen any of our last marketing that's been rolled out over the past 6 months, the human component, you know, we talk a lot about it. TTIi, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. Paul Andrews Jr., who started the company 50 years ago, passed away 24 hours before that exact day that he started the company 50 years ago. So we look at it, and Paul built the company from a people perspective. So the whole human component piece of it, we look at it that all the tools, all the inventory, none of it's worth anything if we don't have that human component there. We happen to believe our success, our ability to grow from this little small distributor in Fort Worth, Texas, to a global $7.5 billion entity, it's all on the backs of the people. And that's what makes the difference. So, you know, we've got people that do, you know, all types of jobs. It's from our warehouse people to our IT people, not to mention the sales people, the supply chain, the product people, you know, so it takes all of it to make this thing work. So if you guys saw my list of the things that keep me up at night, I've already mentioned the transportation piece, but we've got the people issue, both attracting the talent, because the market out there is really difficult. And then second, the succession planning, the age of the industry, and the number of people that are set to retire or reach retirement age over the next 10 years. If I were to share those numbers with you, it'd keep you up at night too. But it's a large number, myself included. In the next 10 years, you know, we've got a huge part of the population, and we're trying to figure out how to attract younger talent into a business that when I came into it was thought of as high tech. It's not thought of as much as being high tech. Software is more in that direction, or crypto or something. So, you know, we're trying to make it sexy again. And we happen to believe it is. Look at the customers that we get to deal with. Look at the size of the entities. And, you know, SpaceX. I was out And, you know, right before COVID was one of my last trips, and I was like a 12-year-old kid again. And it's, you know, and I get to see the rockets being built in the control center, and this industry is something, but the people piece of it, it's it's the secret sauce behind TTI, and it's going to be the secret to the long-term success.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting industry, and I just feel bad that we spent the last hour telling people how hard it is. But you know, fundamentally, it's very, very, very rewarding, and there's yeah, lots of great work to be done and lots of fantastic products. I always come away from CES blown away by the products and the innovation I see there, but also blown away by the talent that's in the industry that's bringing those products to market.
Yeah, well, good. Listen, we could keep talking on. I still have a whole page of questions and I won't ask them. So in respect to your time, I want to thank you both, Lynn and Don, for sharing with us. I'm sure the audience appreciates it. Hopefully we can get a catch up maybe in 2022 after that first half has passed that Don says will be the worst of it. So we'll check on his forecast.
I'm not sure I want to be the only one quoted on that.
I don't think you are now.
Okay.
Everybody's making predictions.
They all are, and they're all starting to extend, I've noticed. So, you know, but listen, thank you both very much. Let me wish you both happy Thanksgiving next week as well, and happy holidays as we end the new year. Thank you both very much for your time today. It's greatly appreciated.
Great. Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.